Yeah, definitely.
Is it
Action.
is it filming? Can you just check for me, please? Perfect. Right. So thank you for joining us today, Jamie. As you know, Launchpad is Reading's homelessness prevention charity, and we work with agencies across the town to support people who are homeless or at risk of losing their home. And this is the third question and answer session in the run-up to the election tomorrow. We've been speaking to prospective parliamentary candidates in Reading West about some of the key issues that our clients face. So you're our last prospective parliamentary candidate, so welcome. If we just kick things off with you telling us a little bit about yourself and your background, and then we'll go into some questions.
Okay, sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. I hope you don't mind if I read a few things.
No, of course.
My memory's not great. But, yeah, I'm Jamie Whitham, Green Party candidate for Reading West. I was born in Reading in 1974, attended Coley Park Primary School, and then I moved away for a few years, returning in 92 for university. I studied cybernetics control engineering at Reading University, and I've been here on and off since then. I lived abroad for a few years in the EU, and I worked as a software engineer. I was also elected onto Reading Borough Council in 2012 and again in 2019 as a Green Party councillor. My main priorities for this election are the climate emergency, reversing austerity, and people's vote on the final say of Brexit. Have been aware of Launchpad for a while. I did a couple of big sleep outs.
Did you?
One with Matt Allwright band was quite good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's
Okay, so let's start with questions. So let's talk first about rough sleeping. There are an estimated 4,677 people sleeping rough in England, and an annual count of rough sleepers by Reading Borough Council in November last year found 25 people sleeping rough on the streets in Reading. What do you think is the best approach to preventing homelessness and reducing these numbers?
Yeah, so obviously it's terrible that this is happening. I think that the Green Party would give councils clearer guidance and better training on helping homeless people, including support for the housing first approach rather than the current treatment first model. With a widening of grounds on which councils can offer help to people without a home, and the provision of social services once a person is housed. The extra costs of this could be met from our £10 billion a year uplift into the council funding in a manifesto. We'd also refocus council services in the area of homelessness prevention rather than crisis management, through expanding and combining multiple funding pots into a single grant distributed to councils. We'd also repeal the Vagrancy Act 1824, which criminalises street homelessness and can hinder attempts to help those without a home. And we'd be providing more affordable social housing and introducing a universal basic income, as well as properly funded mental health services.
Okay, so talking about private rent prices, many of our clients are forced into private accommodation because of the huge lack of social housing in our area, but the weekly rent payments for private rented accommodation are well above the local housing allowance. So for example, the housing allowance for a room in shared accommodation is £81.14 a week, yet the average rent price for a room in Reading is £115 a week, so there's a fairly sizable difference. How will you resolve this issue?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different approaches to that. One, will be supporting councils to set more affordable rent rates for social housing tenants in their area by lifting the local housing allowance and reconnecting it to average area rents. We'd also, on the other side of that, we'd introduce rent controls on private tenancies which reflect average local income rates and the cost of maintenance, as well as ending no-fault evictions and making it easier to set up community-led housing initiatives for private renters in HMOs to buy and run their homes as a housing co-op. We'd also pay housing benefit top-up on top of our universal basic income, which would be aimed at covering the rent. I guess that's not the end of the problem. The real issue is the lack of social housing in Reading. And so we would be looking nationally to build 100,000 new social housing a year, which would be insulated to passive house standards, which would see them using 90% less energy, so that their bills would be hugely dropped as well. insulating the current housing stock, including private rented accommodation, and that would start with people on low incomes.
Okay, so touching on your point about social housing, do you think right to buy should be abolished?
Yes, simple answer. Yes. So, we would abolish the heavily subsidised current right to buy programme, and we will instead allow councils to set discounts locally and retain 100% of the receipts to reinvest into new and existing houses.
Okay, and you also touched on Section 21. So over the summer there was a consultation process on the abolition of Section 21. What are the Green Party's stance on no-fault eviction, and what do you plan to do about it if you get into power?
So I'd like to see the abolition of Section 21 no-fault evictions. It's the choice of good tenants whether they wish to remain in a property. The landlord may only end the tenancy at time in order to sell the property with a proof of purchase, or to move, or where there has been a serious breach of contract.
Okay. So a huge barrier our client group faces with securing accommodation is finding landlords or estate agents who will accept benefits or the rent guarantee scheme. So even when a client will say have a good track record of paying rent and on time, what does your party plan to do about this, and do you consider that to be discriminatory?
Yes, I do consider it to be discriminatory. And discrimination within the private rented sector is a significant problem. The Green Party would like to make it illegal to discriminate against tenants who receive housing benefit and scrap requirements for landlords to check the immigration status of tenants as well. Someone I know was very stressed when their circumstances changed. They needed to claim housing benefit, and they actually put it off for a year because their landlord was going to find out at that point, and in the end they actually had to get universal credit. But luckily their landlord was okay, but it was very stressful for them, and that was someone who was already in accommodation. I don't really think it even makes any sense for landlords to discriminate, because in the end that's going to be a guaranteed payment, whereas just someone else may not pay on time. So.
Okay, so and finally, we see many landlords letting properties in substandard conditions or unsafe conditions, yet they charge high rates. Are there any plans to tackle this issue?
Yes, so in terms of the high rents, we'd be looking to introduce rent controls to make renting affordable. And our government-funded installation scheme would make a good start on poor quality private rental housing, and the availability of good quality council homes as well would also sort of make poor quality overpriced private rental properties be less desirable, because there'd be other choices. And the Green Party would also reintroduce repairs and improvement grants and review the tax treatment of private landlords to incentivize repairs, improvements, better management and longer tenancies. Tax allowances on buy-to-let mortgages will be abolished. And to tackle grid and slum landlords, the Green Party would simplify and toughen the Housing Health and Safety Rating System, HHSRS, ensure local authorities dedicate adequate resources to proactively enforcing it, and introduce a national landlord licensing scheme with the enforcement of licences operated by local authorities and punitive penalties for landlords who fail to gain a licence or meet the requirements. We'd also tackle landlords converting homes into unsuitable dwellings and then obtaining lawful development certificate by giving local authorities 10 years to take enforcement action rather than the current 4.
Okay. If we put questions out to the audience, does anyone have any questions?
I've got food policy, housing policy, wonderful.
James?
So do you think the UK's current housing stock is fit for purpose, given that we're expecting a minimum of a 2-degree temperature rise and more likely 3 to 4 degree temperature rise in the next 50 to 100 years?
No, definitely not. So one of our main manifesto commitments is to put a huge amount of money into retrofitting insulation onto old properties, which then particularly affects Reading, as well as building 100,000 new council homes every year that would all be built to passive house standards.
Any other questions? Ian?
in terms, one of the issues, because you talk about the housing first model, which is a good model and works very well in Finland and places like this. The problem is they've got capacity of housing. At the present moment, there is nowhere. The housing first model doesn't work because there's nowhere to put people. If you put a homeless person into a housing first model, in terms of all that does is deprive someone else. We keep on recutting the cake, and it doesn't matter how many times you recut it, the cake's still the same size. What we need to do is to build the houses, then you can develop a housing first model rather than the other way around. So I'm just pointing that out. The idea of housing first would be great, but there's just no, around here there's just no accommodation.
Absolutely, yes. Building houses would be the
On
first
that
priority.
thing, there is a lot, when you drive around in Reading, there is a lot of brownfield sites that are basically nothing's happening on them. You know, some large companies are holding those land back. You know, the Green Party encourage them to do something in a short space of time. And also, you know, just as an example, the Red Cow pub in Southampton Street's been closed for years and years, and no one's done anything about pulling it down and building flats or something, affordable flats. So there's definitely property available. Maybe not an awful lot, but we should be doing something about it.
Yes, so certainly we want to empower councils to have the power to take empty properties back out of the bring them back into use. I think we also want to reform council tax so that rather than the user of land paying council tax or rates, it's the owner, so there'll be a land value tax. Because at the moment, I think it's something like 50% of all land is owned by 1% of the population. And this means that a lot of people just make money from doing nothing really, and they pay the least tax. So,
So, can I ask another question?
Of course you can, yeah.
The PPR, is it the primary property? The Green Party's got some views on that, haven't they? They're going to change the rules around people being able to claim their main property, you know, from a point of view they don't pay any capital gains tax on the sale.
yes. I can't remember the exact details of that
Yeah,
off the top of my head. I have got the manifesto with me.
I did think it was a bit draconian, you know, the whole thing. I mean, if it's just one property that's got, you know, good unfair charging capital gains tax on the sale.
Yeah.
I have to say, from the alternative point of view, is that there are lots of people, in terms of students, for instance, have to take out huge loans, live in HMOs when they're students, come out, never earn enough money to actually purchase their own property. They have to pay large loans back. They're destined to spend a big chunk of their adult life living in HMOs, and it seems fundamentally wrong if you have people who have two properties who can use it for financial gain, when there's lots of people who will never live in their own property. Everyone should have the right to have their own front door and be able to close their own front door at night. I think this is safe and sound, instead of spending the rest of their life living in a HMO, which is fundamentally wrong. People should have the right to that. This should be a human right, that everyone has their own front door, has a right to kind of close it at night and think, I'm on my own. And I think that that's really important. And if that means sacrifices for other people who have 2 houses, 3 houses, 4 houses, or whatever it is, that's a sacrifice I think they have to make.
Actually, I agree on that, but 2 or 3 unit. I think the problem is that they're also going to apply to one house as well, Green Party, which I think.
Yeah, just double check that, yeah.
Unless
Because I think there was a rumour about that with Labour as well, but I think it turned out to be untrue. I think they just looked at it. It was part of a review, and it wasn't actually the case.
What would be the plans for universal benefit? Because I love the idea of universal benefit, which they've tried either in Finland or Sweden or something like this.
Yeah.
How would you work that?
So everybody would get initial, I think it's £89 a week, and then pensioners would get a slightly higher rate, and then you would get other things like housing benefit on top of that, or disability allowances, and then I think that would, so say someone on maybe an average income, which I think, I'm not sure, it's about 30,000, would see about a 6% pay rise because of that. Whereas people on the higher taxes would basically pay it back, so they get it and then lose it again. But it just stops people having to apply, so it hugely streamlines the system and stops people, quite a few people don't apply for benefits that are entitled to them, and it just means that they are guaranteed to get that money.
What would that mean to people because I presume you're in favour of abolishing universal credit.
Yes.
So therefore, what would that actually mean when you're saying everyone gets it? So people would get a basic minimum of nearly £400, whatever £89 is per times 4, £360, £370 a month, plus benefits which would top it up.
Yes.
Is that? I mean, just out of interest, do you think that's enough?
Yeah, it would be set to be just enough to live on. So it's not going to be fantastic. It's not as good as getting a living wage or something like that. But it's just there as a safety net to stop people that would have had nothing otherwise.
And therefore, that would be a rollout system where everyone simply get that. Everyone would get that. Therefore, you could get rid of lots of things like the DWP in terms of doing all their kind of work, where they're checking up on people and all of these type of things.
Yes. Yeah. So I know no one would have less than they have in the current system.
That wouldn't be hard.
No.
James?
Well, you just said I think you just said the average income in the UK is about 30,000. The median is 22,400. Do you think the UK's drug policy is working?
No. So yeah, I think I'd like to see end of a war on drugs, really. So yeah, to start with, I think we would like to repeal the Misuse of Drugs Act 1971 and the Psychoactive Substances Act 2016, and then invest in education and treat problematic drug use as a health issue, not as a crime, building on successful approaches pioneered in numerous other countries. So replace the current system of prohibition with evidence-based, legalised regulatory system of drug control. Production, import and supply of all drugs will be regulated according to specific risks they pose to the individual, to society and the environment. And we'd like to set up an independent statutory body, the Advisory Council for Drug Safety, comprising of experts who will be responsible for monitoring patterns of drug usage, advising the government on changes to the regulation and sourcing socially and ecologically sustainable supplies of opium, cocaine from the global south.
Any other questions? Christina?
Hi, sorry, just going back to benefits, and James probably has more information than I do, but I think I'm aware that 25-year-olds get less money, don't they, on benefits? Just wondered what you thought about that, and should all people get the same personal allowance?
Yes, I think so, and we certainly with the living wage, we want to see that extended down to 16-year-olds as well, so there isn't that drop for younger people. And so yes, the same applies with the benefits.
Any other questions?
So we know that just providing a house for someone isn't going to be the end to kind of some of their issues. Here at Launchpad, we're also looking to get people kind of motivated and back into work and reconnect them with society. What are your plans to kind of regenerate high streets and town centres that our clients use for a lot of kind of social activity and also for jobs? And what are your plans to deal with casualisation of work and the impacts of automation and future job losses?
That's a hell of a question.
Okay. So yeah, in terms of sort of high streets and the kind of high street and online sales, one of the things we were looking to do would be to reduce the VAT on food and drink served in pubs, bars, restaurants, as well as hotel bookings, theatre, music and museums and so on, so that it will boost the sort of leisure and cultural sectors, helping around 125,000 businesses at the heart of local communities. Also for the sort of small businesses on the high street, we'd like to increase the employment allowance to £10,000, which is currently £3,000, which allows small businesses which employ people to claim back the equivalent national insurance for full-time workers earning the average salary. So that tax cut will benefit hundreds of thousands of small businesses, allowing them to hire more people, increase wages and reduce prices. We'd also like to give small businesses access to lending at affordable rates by helping establish a network of regional mutual banks. These new banks will be created specifically to provide funding for locally led economic initiatives and opportunities, including co-ops, community interest groups and other not-for-profits. We'd also like to see sort of big business paying their share as well by upping corporation tax to 24%, for instance, as well as stopping large companies moving their tax liabilities out of the country.
How do you pitch at 24%? I mean,
I think that's because that's the average of the OECD countries. So I think ours is particularly low at the moment at 19%. I think when it was introduced, it was something like 40%. So it's still quite low.
Would you follow the French example of instituting tax on people like Amazon and Google and the kind of huge multinational companies which have no centres anywhere?
Yeah, I think it is a difficult problem. You've got to try and work out what percentage of their revenue was created in your country. But yes, I certainly think they do need to be taxed.
I mean, that's not that difficult actually. The revenue-based scheme is quite easy to implement. They have to bill the country, you know, so it's just the application of it.
So yeah, I guess you need to enforce it, and it's things like Starbucks and that as well, where they roast the coffee in Switzerland and then charge a license fee for using it here and things. So they're saying, we didn't make any profit in the UK.
That's just a con.
Yeah.
In the Netherlands, it applies some factor as well. I've heard all over Starbucks, you know, just crooks.
So yeah, in terms of
Alleged crooks, obviously.
Sorry,
Alleged crooks.
allegedly is the same. How about you, Sue?
So we also talk about job losses and casualisation of labour. So I think obviously we would end 0 hours contracts, but I think all the parties are now saying that we'd increase. So in terms of job losses, we'd be looking to increase funding for adult education across England and Wales, creating a range of new adult educational programmes for learners to access. And the Green New Deal will bring massive investment into renewable energy, building sustainable housing, creating new jobs and training opportunities in those areas. We'd established an HM customers as an independent agency of government answerable to parts. So this is coming back to the tax companies. So we'd take HMRC away from being answerable to the government of the day and make it answerable to Parliament, so that they can't then go and do a deal with Amazon or Google or whoever and say, okay, just give us 10% of what you owe. So that the people would have power over that, basically.
Any other questions, James?
If we leave the EU, do you think that'll be a positive thing for homeless people?
No, I can't see it being positive for anything, really.
Fair enough.
You did mention about VAT adjustments. In the EU, you can't actually automatically assume you can make those changes. That's one of the restrictions that you have to stay within a certain boundary.
Oh, I understood that the EU were looking at changing those rules, and they've already developed some legislation that's going to be presented to the European Parliament shortly to amend that.
Okay, so yes,
Excellent.
and then any other issues obviously can be negotiated. If you're a member of the EU, you can try and get it changed, whereas you can't if you're not.
It's more of a tenuous link, but prisoners, what's your attitude as regards education for prisoners, rather than just banging them up like 2 hours a day?
Yes, definitely. And also I think that far too many people are in prison. So I think people get sent to prison for sort of drug crimes and things that really shouldn't.
A TV license.
Yeah, shouldn't be there. So I think obviously they're massively overcrowded, and if they were less people in prison, then there would be more resources to do education and so on.
Christina?
I'd like to ask a question about transport. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
I heard a rumour about electric cars and that the Green Party wanted everyone to have electric cars. Is that true? That's the first question.
So, well, ideally we'd like people to cycle and walk.
Yeah.
But people that do have cars, obviously we would prefer electric cars than petrol, yes.
And the second question is, how will petrol and diesel users be compensated?
I haven't got exact details on that. I think a scrappage scheme would make sense,
Okay.
as was done before, particularly for diesels. But also I think it will naturally happen. So at the moment, as the price of electric cars is getting lower, and the sort of model for cars in this country is that there's a lot of vehicles, and so a lot of company cars. And so at the moment, people pay some sort of monthly price for their car, and that's all based on residual values after 2 or 3 years, or however long the hire is. And as the value of a second-hand petrol car, as diesels already have, plummets, then they're not going to be offering these deals in the first place. So it will all shift to electric cars anyway. And those will then trickle down through the second-hand market.
Do you think the UK has got enough infrastructure to put in place that kind of electric car revolution?
So there certainly aren't enough chargers. There are. I think recently there was a statistic that there are now more electric charging points than petrol stations, but I think that's counting the individual points, and there certainly needs to be a lot more rapid chargers across the country. In terms of the grid, I think National Grid have said that they're happy at the moment with maybe 21 million cars. I think there's probably 24 million on the roads, so the National Grid would have to grow, but they're certainly perfectly happy with that. It's not going to change overnight. And then in the last quarter we generated 50% of our electricity from renewables, so that's good, and if we can just get that up a bit more, we can really get that.
Anyone else? Ian?
Not asking for the Reading seat that you're actually fighting, which is Reading West, but in terms of, would you be encouraging people, Green Party members across the country, to vote tactically tonight to keep the Conservatives out?
That's a good question. We certainly, I mean, it's terrible that we have to talk about this. Really, we would like to see proportional representation so that it wasn't an issue. We had a meeting in the local Green Party to decide, after we'd selected the candidates, whether to stand down or not. So we sort of democratically decided that we would stand. I think in the end, people know the situation, voters can make up their own minds, and so we felt it was better to stand so that those few people that maybe didn't want to vote tactically still had a choice when they came to the polling booth.
Brilliant, well thank you very much. Thanks for coming.
That blind Richard there wasn't to blind you,
It fell down.
And thank you for